I'd love to hear how you came to the concept of merging Winnipeg and Montreal and Tehran.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the seed of the whole idea and what led me on a path to working with Ila and Pirouz and Sylvain and everybody was this story my grandmother told me about her childhood in Winnipeg, which was she and her brother found a $2 bill frozen in the ice in the sidewalk, and they went on this citywide odyssey to get it out, and a hobo defrauded them out of it, and it sort of led them to, question about, their sense of responsibility and, their duty to others. Maybe the hobo needed it more. Anyway, she had this whole kind of, it was a story she told, and I really liked it. And much later, I discovered the films produced by the Qanun studio in Iran, which gave us so many great, masterworks of the great Ostad, Khani Dust Kojast, all of these great films about children facing adult dilemmas. And when I watched these films, there was this strange echo to my grandmother's story, and there was something that really touched me about how this story she had told me, from her life in Winnipeg, found it an echo on the other side of the world in these Iranian films. And that was something that was very beautiful to me, and it sort of led to this idea of telling that story through the cinematic language of these Qanun-style films. And so that led us on this path to this adventure, and it brought in many more ideals. The idea of connecting these two places, that spaces between which you might imagine great distance, and bringing them into proximity through cinema. It's something that art can do, that politics cannot do, that Instagram cannot do. And that was very appealing to us and our own feelings about the world.
You mentioned in the intro, it was very sweet that you're working with your best friends here. I want to hear about how this collaboration came together from all of you.
Yeah, it's true. Most of the people that you just watched, they are friends, are really good friends. Most of them are non-actors. We auditioned them mostly on our lunch, dinner parties, so it was really something based on very, very friendly situations. So we said, okay, let's do this movie with our best friends. And that's why the seed of the movie came from, the joy came from, and the solidarity and closeness. So yeah, when Matthew suggested to me and Pirouz, and then we talked with our producer Sylvain, and we said, okay, let's just do it as much as we can and have it in the community in a way. And I think we were successful about that.
Yeah, I think this film is like a slow cook, like it's been boiling, it's been stirring for like a long, long time, and usually those are the very tasty recipes that I find. So we started developing this film 10 years ago, actually a little bit more than 10 years ago. And so there was some pauses, there was some, ups and downs, it changed a lot. But throughout this process, it was always like we wanted to add something. We wanted to, it was not, there was no going backwards. Even sometimes that you go backward into your decisions, it's always a step forward in this case, So we added, collaborators, which brought new ideas, which it was just like building slowly and slowly until we did the final tasting, and it was just like, okay, it's time to serve, Sorry
Yeah.
about the
It really did sort of emerge out of a very long conversation, which we're still really having fun having, and the idea, of course, was to create a brain, a sort of Quebeco-Irano-Winnipegois brain that could produce its own thoughts, and that's really how I like to approach cinema. I love it's a very collaborative art form, and that's the fun for me. Is building the brain, and the director is the point of synthesis in that brain, maybe. But I think it's always that it's always more alive and more beautiful and more meaningful when all of your creative collaborators have a way to express themselves personally through the prism of whatever we're making together. I feel like that's when these, miracles happen. For example, the scene at the end of the movie where the turkey man sings, that was not something that was in our script, but he came to set and he said, I had this idea. I was thinking I would like to sing for you. And so we were like, yes, let's do it. And really the only adjustment was to turn down the lights, the idea that it would be at night instead of day. But except for that, we just sort of followed him and what he wanted to do, what he wanted to express. Even he called cut at the end of the take when he was done. And we really loved it. We were utterly mesmerized, but we didn't know that day how it would fit into the movie. But it's one of those scenes that now I can't imagine the movie without it. And I feel like that's really true, that when you, when that brain is well calibrated and there's a lot of room for everybody to express how they, their own feelings about what we're making together, then I think it really comes to life and these little miracles happen.
Yeah, absolutely. That scene is really special. And I want to narrow in on the collaboration between you, Ila, as well as Matthew and Firouzabadi, who's not here today. But how did this writing process go? How did you work together as a trio?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of difficult to define. I feel like, again, it was, as I described, very much a conversation. There was sort of a story, which a lot of it kind of had some autobiographical elements to it, I guess. There was the story of my grandmother, which was sort of transmogrified, and then Masoud, who's played by Pirouz, the tour guide. That's kind of inspired by my father, who was a huge advocate of Winnipeg and its bland monuments, and he would lead people around. He was very, excited about those things. And then the third part, of course, is me. After my first feature, I was very badly in debt, and I worked for the government for a year. And my last day of the government was very much like how it is in the movie. And then my mother passed away, and so that plot kind of is interweaving memories and dreams I had and things like that. So all of these, that material comes from a very, very personal place, and I felt that it was important for this particular methodology to make myself as vulnerable as I could. But beyond that, we were constantly sort of scripting the thing together. The dialogue was principally written by Pirouz and Ila. And also a lot of it was sort of, as I say, with Aray Nabatian, who sings at the end, there were these little things that happened. It was sort of, we were kind of constructing it even as we were shooting. And mercifully, we had a very visionary producer to work with, who was the first to get behind our very crazy ideas and made a lot of space for these spontaneous moments that happen. But I feel like we were constantly writing it and finding scenes, right? Wouldn't you say?
We're still doing it.
Well, you mentioned the kind of meta-narrative. I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into that because there are almost two different films in here. There's this children's story, and then there's this kind of autobiographical element, and which you starred in yourself. So could you talk about that decision, the decision to be in this film?
Yeah, Khanu, maybe you should answer this.
Yeah, Matthew had a little bit of dilemma for playing in the movie, but Pirouz and I really insisted, because we said this is like kind of his biography in a very hallucinating mood. But we said, you're the only person who can do that because you're talking Farsi, okay, progressing a lot, let's say. And why not? You're gonna be the best person just to play it. And he had a little bit of dilemma. He said, because it's very difficult really just to be behind the camera and then play. So it was a difficult decision for him, but I'm very happy that he was brave and he did that. Let's say you were brave.
I have to say this is a good example of how collaborative the whole process was. Of course, Matthew was afraid he could not direct himself. It's complicated to have some kind of distance to have the two hats at the same time and stuff, but Ila, Pirouz, there was a lot of looks, upon this, and we took the time to converse, to discuss like how it was, acted, and so we gave room so that it remained collaborative, and I personally thought it was a good idea to have as much time as possible so that it remains organic into its processing, And that's a good example of like how we could adjust because we allowed to have the time to sort of adjust. And yeah.
Yeah, I would typically do sort of a blocking with Pirouz, playing my body, and then I would go in and do it when we shot. Even sometimes you don't even see me; you just see my shoulder or something. That's always Pirouz. It's so we managed to do it. I mean, it's a thing it's a strange thing to do, but of course people do this, right? They it is something that we do sometimes, and we felt that really the theme of the thing would have more energy if it was actually really me, really playing this version of myself. And we were, of course, very inspired by Hossein Sabzian, the star of Abbas Kiarostami's film Nemai Nazdik, who, of course, in that film plays pretends to fraudulently that he is the great Iranian director Mohsen Makhmalbaf, and tricks this family into believing that he's actually Makhmalbaf. And so that was sort of the tuning fork, the idea that just like Sabzian pretending to be Makhmalbaf, I could do this fraudulent imitation of myself.
I want to ask now about the production design. In both this as well as your first feature, the 20th century, production design seems like it's a very important element. And it's very interesting the way you've kind of merged the Canada, the Tehran in this. Can you talk about kind of how you conceived of all of that?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It was always about kind of merging of codes, and it was about sort of taking, I guess, iconographies to some degree and merging them. We think of the film as a Venn diagram, as a sort of Hawaiian pizza, if I may be so bold, and it's about sort of taking codes where we might identify a space and blending them with other codes. And so that was sort of the essence of the whole project. I mean, what I always like to say is that it is cinematic language, first and foremost, and Iranian cinema emerges out of 1,000 years of poetry, and Canadian cinema emerges out of 50 years of discount furniture commercials. And putting these two together was kind of the essence of the entire matter. It was about creating an interzone. It wasn't going to be an Iranian film, it wasn't going to be a Canadian film, but in some way it's a confluence of both. It's like at the center of that Venn diagram. And that's something that was really beautiful to us, was to create this sort of third space that is beyond borders and beyond rigidities, beyond binaries, where both could commingle. And what we find really gratifying about that is that a lot of viewers have watched it, Canadians who might have very little encounter of Iran, Iranians who might have very little encounter of Canada, have both said to us that the film makes them feel nostalgic. And what is really beautiful about that is that both spaces are so intimately merged in the film that, in a way, they're feeling nostalgia for each other. And that's sort of, kind of really what the whole project means to us.
That's really beautiful. I want to ask lastly about the turkeys, because they seem remarkably well behaved. Could you talk about what it was like working with turkeys?
Yeah, it was great working with turkeys. The first day with the turkey was the last shot of the film, where they scuttle along, you know, sort of moving past the frame. And that's really what I hoped they would do. I hope they would, you know, do this one steady line across the frame. And we worked with, of course, a turkey tamer, I guess, turkey master. He only does turkeys, actually. And he hired a group of wild turkeys who were very accustomed to performing in winter. And anyway, they just did it. On take one, they just nailed the thing. It was like, I couldn't believe it. And we had booked like 3 hours for this because we thought, you know, they're turkeys. This will be chaos, right? But just on take one, they just nailed it. And then Isabel Stachenko, the director of photography, is like, if we wait a half hour, the light will be really pretty. So we're like, okay, we'll do that. And then we waited for the light. Action. Nailed it again. Like, they just nailed it. Like, these turkeys can do anything. Anyway, a few days later, we were shooting in a snow dump with one single turkey, and he escaped. he climbed up this enormous pile of snow where no human could get him and just sort of gazed at us. And that sort of ended the night. And the next morning he was arrested by the Montreal Police Department. And came back to deliver what I think is a very soulful performance. On the bus, that was certainly the strangest, I think, day of filmmaking ever in my life. We were filming with Ila Firouzabadi, who's a local icon in Montreal, someone was a very inspirational figure to all of us, and she's just, performing next to this turkey. But the turkey wrangler said, it's springtime. There's a chance the turkey might try to mate with Himela. So we erected this plexiglass barricade between the two. But it went really well. The turkey was, actually pretty calm, and any fight between Himela and a turkey, Himela will win. There's no questions.